Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back to After the Dance right here on the Fumble.
Yeah.
So glad you guys took time to join us. So make sure you subscribe and hit that thumbs up and the notification bell so you can make sure you know all of our content. I'm Jackie Ray. Make sure you follow me on all things social media at JRayTheFanatic.
Hey, it's your boy Chris. You can find me everywhere at CK2K.
Yes. How'd you like these two episodes?
Oh, man, emotional.
Very.
It's a very emotional weekend.
I'm going to kind of zoom through like the games and stuff of the first one because I think it's important to really get into the dynamic of, you know, what happened with Michael Jordan's dad. But I did if I had to name this episode, I would name it a quote from Michael Jordan that says, "Winning has a price. Leadership has a price." And I think we see in these two episodes that the price of fame and the constant scrutiny and how that played a part.
Yes.
So shouts out to Michael Jordan for being vulnerable in this episode, even in his interviews now. I thought that was super dope. I thought how the first episode opened was hilarious. It opened with a reporter asking Jerry, you know, with all the backstabbing that's going on between you and the coach, are you surprised this team is still together? And he got so childishly mad. Like I said, I kind of want to just skip through the games a little bit and just get to the meat of this first episode, which is the death of Michael Jordan's dad. And it starts with his assistant saying that he was supposed to go pick up dad. Dad didn't show, so he calls Michael Jordan's mom and she says, oh, you know what? He's probably just caught up playing golf. But then when they didn't hear from him for some time, then, you know, the worry starts. And then, of course, on August 13th, his body was found. He had one gunshot to the chest. And then two kids ended up being charged with his murder. Now, I was alive during this time, and I remember my dad constantly saying, nope, that's a hit. That's a hit because of, you know, Michael Jordan's gambling debt. And this is before the media started saying it. And so one of the things they said in this is like, it's shameful, it's blasphemous that the reporters and the media kind of went that route. I don't think it's a far leap when you consider, you know, his gambling debt, the fact that he was hanging out with a known drug trafficker. Exactly. That drug trafficker, by his own admission, was hanging out with big time criminals that moved in mafia type fashion. I don't think it's a big leap to think that this one had something to do with the other. Did you think it was a big leap?
Unfortunately, no. You know, when I first heard about all this way back when, and I heard that was a thing and that's a theory, I was like, what? But then, of course, the older you get, the more information you get. Yeah, you're right. I don't know if it's true, but I don't see how it's not a far-fetched idea.
Yeah,
sadly,
it's not. And so then, of course, Jordan's in the middle of a gambling investigation from the NBA. Then he goes and he pitches the first pitch, I think during the Blue Jays and the Sox game. And then right after that, he tells everyone that he wants to retire. So here's my thought process on this one. And here's why I am still on team. This was a suspension, because you have the biggest name in basketball at that time, and suspending him looks way worse than him retiring. From the optics, it just looks way worse. And if you really just need a break, why do you play another sport? I know he said, oh, because my dad. No, if you are physically and mentally beat down, you don't start another sport that you haven't played in how long, and that your body's not even prepared for you playing. So I don't know. I'm still on team. It was a suspension. The Bulls do okay. They don't, you know, obviously they don't, you know, win the championship without MJ, but they do go to the playoffs, and then they lose to your Knicks. Are you excited?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Let me say it again. The Knicks.
Gotta hear it one more time. Go ahead. Continue, so.
How'd you feel about that? I thought of you immediately. I was like, oh, Chris must be smiling ear to ear right now.
It's funny because that moment is sweet because they beat the Bulls, but then all I could think is O.J. Simpson still ruining and taking over the headlines, and Hakeem Olajuwon whooping the Knicks. But that moment was all they showed, the Knicks beating the Bulls, and that's all I'm going to celebrate.
I was on Twitter when it was happening, and somebody did, I guess, I don't remember this at all, but apparently there was a split screen. It was the Knicks on one side of the TV and then OJ on the other. So the Knicks didn't even have like their true
They did it, man. OJ took over.
So another good highlight in this episode was Scottie Pippen. Now, I am a huge fan of Scottie Pippen. Yeah. You know, he had to become the leader once MJ was gone, and he did not lead with the iron fist. He was a kinder, gentler leader. He had a moment of petty that I personally would have probably done too, because you're the biggest basketball player on that team at the time. And Phil says, "Oh, we want you to bring the ball out," like, you know what I mean, and then pass it to Tony Kukoc, which worked. It worked, but there is a tweet that we're gonna get to tweets at the end, but this one is just so relevant because it's my thoughts exactly. The great what if for me about this play where Pippen checked himself out. What the hell was going to happen had Kukoc missed the shot?
That's a great
what? Because there would have been time. And if Scottie wasn't in there, you know, and then to hear that Cartwright had to give this speech where he cried and then Scottie apologized. But I love the interview of Scottie today where he was like, you know, I wish it hadn't happened that way. But if all the circumstances were still the same, I probably would have done the same thing. I totally respect that. Do you agree with that sentiment or no?
To me, I'm indifferent. With it because it just feels like it's out of Scottie's personality, because like you just said, he's this, you know, giving leader, you know, he wants one for all, this and that. But then the one moment that they're not calling on you on a play that had, as they showed, worked several times throughout the season and ended up working again, and then you're checking yourself out. I can see why Bill Cartwright felt the way he was, because that's just not the kind of leader that Scottie was. And that was him out of his element, not being himself. So I'm indifferent on it. Like, I get both sides of it. I think Scottie knows that he was out of pocket, but at the same time, when you're the dude, you expect to get the ball in that situation. So I'm half and half on that one.
Yeah, but he redeemed himself with that savage dunk over Patrick Ewing. That's still one of the most beautiful moments in sports history.
Who won though? That's all I care about.
Okay, so
Pat
let's just move on.
I got you, Pat.
So it also kind of showed that Scott Burrell handled the jackassness of, I don't know if I can say that, but he handled the jackassness of Jordan very, very well. He was a true gentleman with it.
He sure
I thought that was a really dope thing to show. But again, one of my favorite moments is when Michael Jordan is explaining, you know, and literally I felt like he was trying to defend himself. He was like, look, that's how I played the game. And then he ended up getting like teary-eyed and emotional and having to take a break. And my first reaction was like, the hell are you crying for? But then, you know, when I thought about it, I was like, that has to be a lot for you to genuinely give your heart and soul into something because you want to win and because you want to motivate others around you to want to win as well. And then now you're scrutinized for it and everybody says, oh, well, could you have done things differently? If he had done things differently, they probably wouldn't have been the Bulls that they were. We wouldn't be having this documentary, you know?
Nope.
So at that moment, once I reevaluated, then I really appreciated he still holds on to some of the scrutiny that he was getting back then, and that makes him emotional. And I appreciated him showing that to us.
Same.
What'd you think about that moment?
No, I loved it.
Why are you crying, or did you like it? Did you think it made sense?
No, it all made sense, and that to me showed that how much he really cared. It just, he shows it the way that he shows it. That's why I stand by what I said on the live on Friday. I do believe that Michael Jordan was the bully of all bullies. I know that there's the Dennis Rodmans, the whoever, the Oakleys, whoever. But the thing is, theirs was just bullying without a lesson. MJ was bullying to build the character of the team. So it's a sense of everyone winning this together, not just the best players are doing what they're supposed to do while the other guys are going for the ride. And that was just his way of teaching that lesson. And that's why I said on Friday, I was like, without that, Michael Jordan might not be the Michael Jordan that we know right now. You know what I'm saying? So I just feel like that's such a crucial part of who he is and why he's the great. And I felt it when he started to tear up. Like, that just showed how much he cares about winning and cares about his teammates regardless of how the way he did it. So I loved it. I'm all for it.
Yeah, so this episode 7 was emotional. Episode 8 gets more emotional. Chris, do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I would say emotional in a different sense. Okay, now, like you named episode 7, I also have a name for episode 8, and I called it senseless motivation, because the whole point of the episode was Michael finding motivation with any damn thing. And I loved it. I'm all for it. Yeah. And it immediately started with BJ Armstrong. Now, they showed in 98 when he was on the Hornets at the time, hitting that very clutch shot over Michael and yelling in his face, and then proceeds to go to the past when pretty much BJ Armstrong was the one that brought him back into the Bulls practice and working out with the team and saying that I'll bust your ass. You too old. You're not ready for this. And next thing you know, MJ's at practice from practice. And then the famous note saying he's back started everything. But before I even get to that, we got to talk about poor LeBradford Smith, because this man was lied upon and was killed
for so long.
Right. Was killed because of an imagination by Michael Jordan. Now, in a senseless game against the Washington Bullets, we heard the story about LeBradford Smith dropping 36 points on MJ and the Bulls. And MJ claimed that LeBradford went to him after the game and said, "Nice game, Mike." And that was all MJ needed to tear LeBradford up of the next game against them in Washington, where he dropped 36 in the first half. We then find out later that LeBradford said no such thing. MJ is a psychopath and made that all up. So I have to ask you the question. MJ using everything and anything as motivation, okay? Does that make him a psycho? And is anybody in the league right now doing that?
I think it makes him brilliant, because it's like in his head, he was like, I bet he wanted to say this to me. Let me just tell people he did say it to me. So then now I have a reason to get mad. I love it because it just gives him his motivation. I don't know if anyone does it in the league now, because we have social media. I mean, like Kevin Durant puts all his business on Twitter.
Sure does.
He it's not like anybody's really hiding anything or making up stuff, but I would love to find out, in the future that somebody actually was making up things about people in their head so they could go out there and play a better game. But I mean, honestly, I don't think we've seen, aside from Kobe, I don't think we've seen anyone as savage as Michael Jordan to lie to themselves, to hype themselves up. I just don't think we've seen that.
But then going back to BJ, like I said, BJ Armstrong, who was the one that initiated MJ to come back to the Bulls, that, or maybe his suspension was over, but that's neither here nor there. But he initiated MJ coming back to the Bulls practice facility, just say what's up to everybody, and it turned into him scrimmaging with the squad, 5-on-5s, 1v1s, and then 5-on-5s, and then the infamous note dropped. He's back. But unfortunately, he came back at a pretty bad time, because the Bulls were struggling to stay over 500. Like we said, this was in the middle, if not the end. I think they had already played 65 games at that point. They were 32-30 or something like that.
It's more than half,
Yeah. So him coming back was literally just to stay above water and go into playoffs, and hopefully some Michael Jordan magic would come from it, and then another championship. Well, it didn't go that way, because good old 45, we heard the story about why he wore 45. And if you do not know that by now, he described the fact that A, he wore 45 before he wore 23 when he first played basketball, and B, his dad had seen him play with the number 23, and he didn't want to go on wearing 23 anymore because his dad wouldn't be watching him play in person. He'd be watching the spirit, but he wasn't watching him in person, so he wanted to wear 45. Well, that didn't last very long, because fast forward to round one. It was round one against the Magic, where the Magic tore them Bulls up to the point where Derek Anderson told his team with Michael to hear that 45 ain't 23.
So nobody's learned the lesson. Nobody's learned that they should just not say anything. I don't understand.
With him there, say it behind the scenes. It's like he said it with MJ to hear it post game. You almost made it out. And my man said, Mike, you know what, Dad? I hope you're watching up there, because 23 coming back. And MJ had a nice performance in that game too, but he was out of gas, ultimately leading to the Magic beating the Bulls And that would be the first time in the 90s, first and only time in the 90s that Michael Jordan would lose a series in the playoffs. Again, didn't go to game 7 because they lost in 6. But only time he lost a series in the 90s. But before I move on, we talked about it because of the possible suspension, or maybe just because he just had that itch and he wanted to play so bad. But do you think that it just would have made more sense for Michael to come back after that season because they were already struggling? Or was that season, that loss to the Magic, crucial to what Michael Jordan would then be his final 3 seasons in the NBA?
I think for the Bulls, it was crucial for him to lose like that, because he carried that momentum. Like his trainer even said, he told Mike, he's like, all right, you let me know when you want to see me next. And Mike was like, I'll see you tomorrow, because he wanted to go back and start training like immediately. And it was because of that loss. But in theory, unless, like I said, this is already a pre-calculated thing, it just doesn't make sense for you to come back at that time. The season is pretty much, I mean, unless it's like some miracle, it was going to end up the same way either way. And you could have taken that opportunity to get your legs under you. That's what people kept saying. He didn't have his legs under him. And he could have taken that opportunity to do that. So I don't think it was an itch. I think that was the time agreed upon, because then he started, practicing with the guys, and then, I think I want. It's all a lie, y'all. But I think he should have. I think he should have waited. And it's not beyond Michael Jordan to lie, because he clearly lies to himself. So don't think he won't lie to us.
Right. He lied. He did lie to us, because he said that poor LeBradford said what he didn't say. That's a lie to us.
Right.
No, I agree. I see the spin that, this was crucial to, Michael Jordan to be the guy that he was in rah-rah. Look, I believe Michael Jordan coming back post Bulls losing the playoffs, or not even making the playoffs, that would have been more than enough motivation right there to be better than that team last season. So I feel like regardless, he would have come back hungry the next season. And speaking of coming back hungry, that same offseason, he was so hungry that he was cheating. He was doing what we would call today, he was tampering. But before
it would be Spygate, is what it would be.
It's what it would be, but I digress, because that same summer he was shooting the original Space Jam, and a lot like LeBron did, for the youngsters who heard that story but didn't know, Michael did the same thing. The whole production team made Mike his own court, indoor gym. It was a dope setup. But here's where the tampering comes in, okay? My man invited the best of the best to come and run with him in his brand new court in Warner Brothers here in LA, Hollywood. Initially, it sounds so nice, MJ running with the guys, trying to get back in shape. Nah, he openly admit that he was trying to find out everybody's game, because he was inviting the newer guys that he missed out on the last 2 seasons. He's like, I don't know his game. Let me see him play up front. And, obviously you see the Reggies, the Ewings, and blah, 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 blah. But look, man, I don't hate it. I'm all for it. Look, it's out of pocket, but it's MJ. And I think that was brilliant. And it ended up working out, because that next season was debatable. It's debatable that it was the best season for a team in the history of basketball. That argument is still up in the air. But that was the season that the team won 73 games. Now, in that period, there was a lot of ups and downs, mainly the down, when he had to punch down on poor little Steve Kerr, because warming up for that season, or during training camp for that season, they were talking about all the intense practices and MJ being MJ, getting in the grill everybody. Well, in a scrimmage, when Steve Kerr called a foul that MJ didn't think was a foul, he then proceeded to elbow him in the face and say that was a foul, where Steve Kerr, shout out to Steve Kerr, went right back to MJ's face and started some beef, leading up to MJ socking him in the face, Phil Jackson kicking him out. Now, MJ
but let's not forget, Steve Kerr threw the first punch, though. He
sure did.
MJ in the chest. And I have immense respect for Steve in the first place, but now I'm just going to go ahead and double it, because, yes, good for you.
He then calls up the owner, gets Steve Kerr's number, tells him, that's on me. I apologize. It was bigger than basketball. I'm just going through a lot of things right now. I apologize. I'm focusing on this, that, and the third. But in this same season was the year that Dennis Rodman first joined the squad. Like I said, they won their 73 games, and they saw the Magic again after losing to the Magic the prior season. They saw him this time in the Eastern Conference Championship and swept them. And that showed that loss the season before really mattered to MJ and the Bulls. Anyways, going into the finals against the Sonics, what's the name of this episode? Senseless Motivation.
Oh, okay. Yep.
After a moment with George Karl, and MJ and George Karl, they have some history because of back in North Carolina. MJ was just trying to say what's up before the series starts. George Karl gave him the shoulder, walked right on by, and there was the senseless motivation, because the Bulls then went to go up 3-0 in the series. Luckily, the Sonics did end up coming back and winning 2 games, so the series was then 3-2, thanks to Gary Payton finally picking up Michael Jordan and claiming that he was the reason why they were able to get back into that series. MJ listened to that and he said, ha, 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 ha. Gary Payton was no issue to me. But what I loved, the way it ended, going back to the emotional ties from the first episode, winning the championship on Father's Day.
Yes.
Everyone that was outside looking in, talking about it, saying that MJ he was able to put it behind him and focus on the game and go out there and be Michael Jordan. And as great as that was, the Bulls then end up going to win the championship. The moment afterward was the moment that just made me like, damn. You could see when he was doing that interview after, talking about, he was trying to make his dad proud. He's trying to make his family proud. This game was for his dad. And you could see that after the game was over, he was holding on tight to that ball. He was not letting anybody take that ball from him, all the way to when you saw the famous picture of him crying on the locker room floor with the basketball, because it meant a lot.
That cry was painful to me, because obviously I personally didn't see the actual cry until today. And that is one of those, if you've ever lost a family member, that kind of cry where it's like your whole body just hurts, your soul hurts, your heart hurts, your mind hurts. And for him to just sprawl out on the floor, that man had nothing left after that game. It's a beautiful and sad thing, but I'm glad that we got to see that. All right, so let's get into some of these social media posts. I already told you about one just because it was so relevant to what we were talking about, but it says, even the looks Mike gave were disrespectful. LMAO, # The Last Dance. That is a disrespectful face. Like, he just looking at him like, you ain't even play right.
You ain't nothing. Wrong. Man, that was my favorite part of both episodes. I'm sorry. Listening to this man call his teammates some hoes. I was crying. I loved it. I
love the Bulls though, because some of the stuff that he said made me want to fight right now, and I'm not even on the team. I'm like, you can't talk to me like that.
I loved it. I loved it.
And then of course King James had to get in on the action, and he said, "Man, ain't nothing like Madison Square Garden." The reason why I do not like this tweet, because it means tomorrow we got to talk about it on the live. Is LeBron gonna go to the Knicks? If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't mind this tweet. I wish
our producer added my response to this, because it was. Oh,
what was your response?
It was literally right now. Chris Tucker from Friday doing the move, the go away, the move on. Yeah, get out of here with that.
But thank you guys so much again for joining us. Once again, I'm Jackie Ray, J Ray the Fanatic on social media.
It's your boy Chris, CK2K on social media.
CK2K. And don't forget, we'll be back tomorrow on the live, so make sure you join us for that. And we will see you one more time next Sunday.
Peace.